Oh shit. Right.
Inaugural in Cape Town, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this evening's event, an inaugural lecture, which will be presented by Professor Lesley Green, who is Professor of Ecopolitics and Director of Environmental Humanities South in the Faculty of Humanities here. I'm also very pleased to welcome the special guests whom we have on the firstly, three distinguished members of the new Earth Humanity Coalition, created in support of the United Nations Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development. And I'd like to introduce them. They are Professor Boshan Miskovich, who is Vice President of Science and Technology, World Academy of Arts and Sciences. Then Professor Michel Spiro, who is the President of the International Union Pure and Applied Physics, and one of the founders of CERN, the Accelerator Center in Geneva. Dr. Luc Ormond, who is the General Secretary of the International Year of Basic Sciences. And I also extend a special welcome, Lesley, to your sons, Jordan and Jonathan, are here. We'll convey that message. So friends, let me allow me to introduce the platform party for this evening's event. On my right, we have Professor Shose Kessi, who's the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, and she will introduce our lecturer. Then on her right, we have Professor Green, of course. On her right, Professor Bailey van Rooyen, who is Group Executive of the Impact Center at the Human Sciences Research Council. She's also an honorary professor at the University of Witwatersrand, and she will later on offer a word of thanks. And then on her right, we have Professor Ravani Ramgondo, who is Deputy Vice Chancellor for Transformation, Student Affairs, and Social Responsiveness. So, ladies and gentlemen, inaugural lectures are a very special event in the life of the university. They mark the ascent to full professorship. This is the highest academic rank, and therefore one that is aspired to by all serious scholars. Whether appointment to this rank or promotion, either way, it constitutes recognition of the stature of the individual and also the high quality and the impact of their academic work. The process leading to becoming a professor, I can tell you, is an arduous one by whichever route. The criteria are extremely demanding, and so the rank is all the more prized. Inaugural lectures provide an opportunity to celebrate the achievements of the lecturer, first of all, and then also importantly, they provide an opportunity for the lecturer to share insights into his or her scholarly work in a manner that would be accessible to a broad audience, to tell us, in other words, something of what they profess. Professor Green's research focuses on understanding and strengthening justice-based environmental governance in Southern Africa. One of her focus areas is in the relationship between knowledge and political life in the era of climate crisis, extinctions, risks, and threats also to habitability. This evening, she will be introduced more fully in a moment, but I can tell you now, she'll provide her perspective on the ongoing human crisis surrounding the controversial Cabo Delgado gas projects in Mozambique. Various analytical reports have labeled Cabo Delgado, and I'll quote here, a symptom of governance failure, a gas Eldorado and security nightmare, and SADC's biggest security threat. In South Africa, in fact, we have had recent controversy around Shell's unsuccessful efforts to undertake seismic blasting tests of oil and gas along the coast. Last week, two leaders of the community-based movement that opposed Shell successfully were honored as joint recipients of the 35th Golden Environmental Prize for the Africa region. So by increasing or developing a better understanding of Professor Green's work, we also build our understanding of the interconnectedness of national economics and economies, Africa's reliance on energy, multinationals, environmental governance, human safety, and sustainability. So with that, it gives me pleasure to hand over now to Professor Casey, who will introduce our lecture. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's such a joyful occasion to bring Professor Lesley Green to the stage. Lesley is a visionary whose rare eye into the future must lead her to many frustrations in working with mere mortals like us. She has big ideas and projects that are innovative that the rest of us cannot keep up with. Ever bold in her intellectual strides and deeply ethical, she challenges the dominant intellectual traditions in social and environmental sciences. She is a fierce proponent of social justice and upholds futures that move away from monolithic thinking towards embracing pluralisms. This is hugely significant given the historical damage that such dogmatic and authoritarian approaches have caused in South Africa, the global South, and indeed the whole world. Lesley stands firmly against unjust knowledge practices which serve as justifications for unjust public practices by states and corporations under the neoliberal order. She has done this here in the city of Cape Town and in corners further ashore from us. Her tenure as the Director of Environmental Humanities South has spurred UCT into a key position on African ecopolitics, which is perfectly in line with our continental focus as a university. A central figure in conscious South African environmentalism, Lesley has always connected her focus to a continent-wide vision to develop an African critical zone of social science scholarship. Now in its 10th year, EHS has hosted students from 19 African countries. A truly transdisciplinary as well as multidisciplinary scholar, her collaborations with colleagues far and wide has carved futuristic work for younger generations to take forth. A less well-known fact about Professor Green is her excellence in mentoring emerging scholars, thus safeguarding the importance of the pioneering work that she is doing while richly contributing to the development of these fine scholars who are our future. She is an award-winning scholar for her work, receiving critical acclaim at home and abroad. Her book, Rock, Water, Life, Ecology and Humanities for Decolonizing South Africa, won the Humanities Book Prize awarded by the Academy of Science of South Africa in 2023. She is also an incredible fundraiser with widespread recognition for the impact of her scholarship. She was recently awarded a $4.4 million US grant from Science for Africa for a 5-country project along Africa's Indian Ocean coast to develop an African critical zone social science scholarship in partnership with South Africa's Human Science Human Sciences Research Council. For us as UCT, she is also our ambassador, and we are proud to have her representing us at the highest level with the design of activities with the United Nations in its decade of sciences for sustainable development. Professor Green is a former Fulbright scholar at the Science and Justice Research Center at the University of California at Santa Cruz, Mandela Fellow at Harvard, Rockefeller Humanities Fellow at the Smithsonian, and Cheney Fellow at the University of Leeds Global Food and Environment Institute. It is my immense pleasure to welcome to the podium our flying star who remains a grounded gem, Professor Lesley Green.
Thank you so much. Those are kind words from both of you. Grateful. Thank you all for being here. It's a real pleasure to have you here, and look forward to opening conversations on the basis of what I have to offer this evening. Because I think when one sees a middle-aged white South African woman reading a Environmental Humanities South, one might think of let's say the unbearable lightness of being. But the work is really to try to build different approach entirely to scholarship across the natural sciences and the human sciences to come up with completely different ideas. I'm really grateful, proud of our fellows, our postdoctoral fellows. I will introduce later at the end of this talk. So thank you for being here, and it's a joy to be on a journey with you all. So this project began from realizing that there was an extraordinary moment when total gas declared force majeure, having done a huge environmental social impact assessment, 5,000 pages. How many PhDs is that? Many, and that's single-spaced. So to declare force majeure after doing 5,000 pages of research over 4 years, I think it's fair to say that something is wrong with your science. What happened was completely unforeseeable. So in this paper, what I'm trying to do is open up that discussion and then link it back to the opportunity we have in the UN decade of sciences for sustainable development, which will be kicking off in Colombia later this year. So just to start, let us start with this force majeure. And how did we get there? So the Anthropocene is barely felt in offices where thermostats, water coolers, lights, plants, and electricity condition indoor ecologies to spec. The bluegrass crystal palaces that we see in downtown financial districts of every city in the world promise a world where a mouse click today will produce a cardboard box tomorrow, day after day, in perpetuity. And yet, this blue glass cosmos, to which all of us are tied one way or the other, is able to maintain this belief because it subsists in an invisible relation to the frontiers of the Anthropocene that supply us variously with coffee, chocolate, sugar, nuts, grains, bananas, tobacco, meat, fish, rice, coal, oil, gas, metals, water, and holidays, among other things. So, one such frontier is Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique, where this east coast slips under the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. It was etched in colonial stamps like this one, the palm-lined beach under the banner of the Mozambican Company. And the same palm-lined beach appears in tourist brochures a century later as a paradise of relaxing earthly connection to corals and seagrass, palms and sunshine. But in 2013, Cabo Delgado moved from tourist brochures to headlines when it was announced that there was a huge natural gas discovery offshore. We were talking trillions of cubic feet of gas. So Mozambique very rapidly approved 3 gas extraction projects. One was led by Total Energies, the other was led by ExxonMobil, NI, and the third one was going to be offshore. But these 2 larger projects share the processing plant on a place called the Afungi Peninsula, right on the border of Mozambique and Tanzania. So between January 2016 and September 2019, global headlines changed again. Hundreds of violent events were recorded in Cabo Delgado, and in that 3-year period, 931 people were recorded killed. In 1 month alone, out of June 2019, the multilateral African Bank, Bank Africain de Développement, declared that the project, the liquefied natural gas project, advanced 3 of its high 5s, which are to light up and power Africa, to industrialize Africa, to improve the quality of life for the people of Africa, and it signed off on a $400 million loan to the project in mid-2020. It's worth noting that last month, April 2024, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs announced an emergency request for about the same amount, seeking $413 million in emergency aid for Cabo Delgado. But let's go back to 2019. The African Development Bank's decision was made on the basis of the acceptance of this environmental and social impact assessment, which was researched painstakingly by herpetologists, hydrologists, ornithologists, botanists, pedologists, archaeologists, and a social scientist. It runs to 4,795 pages in total. It was completed between 2013 and 2016, and it demonstrates how best to mitigate the damage that was going to be done to the Afungi Peninsula by the massive development. So this is the Afungi Peninsula that you see here. The project required hundreds of millions of dollars in procurement, heavy machinery, building operations, and village removals. 5 villages were removed to make a place for this plant. The journalist Alex Perry describes the physical plan. The development acquired 16,000 acres of the Afungi Peninsula to be cleared of farms and villages, then enclosed in 2 parallel 12-foot tall fences, inside of which contractors built a port, an airport, a street grid, power station, a water plant, an emergency room, a cafeteria, a bar, a gym, hundreds of ensuite cabins for Total's managers, all arranged in rows, connected by covered walkways and stronger streetlights. Next, huge tracts outside of Afungi would be transformed into half a dozen giant workers' camps, thousands of 4-bed cabins with communal washrooms and mess halls to sleep a labor force of 15,000. Multiple studies found that local people were entirely left out of the procurement chains, which overwhelmingly went to elites and foreign operators, stoking a local sense that Frelimo had failed local people, fanning the tensions expressed by Shia preachers who argued that Sunni Muslims were in league with Frelimo and with elite politics. Moreover, 12% of the expropriated land, largely Muslim, was allocated to, cannot make this up, a Texan evangelical company called Sunshine Nuts. In February 2021, the Mozambique liquefied natural gas project and the African Development Bank were jointly awarded the Multilateral Deal of the Year 2020 by Project Finance International, which prides itself as the leading source of intelligence of global project finance. In a press release, the African Development Bank declared, in addition to loan financing, the bank played a lead role in ensuring the project's compliance with strict environmental and social standards. The $24 billion project will unlock economic growth for Mozambique, benefit millions of people in the country, while building climate resilience, international best practice, women's empowerment, and job creation. One has to wonder at the boardroom cosmology. To promote climate resilience, the bank would have to offset carbon emissions of 100 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. This would, according to one source, require a forest of 6.5 billion acres, roughly the size of Russia, plus a chunk of Canada. Moreover, when this press statement was released in February 2021, violence had already overwhelmed the Mozambican army and the Russian Wagner group, both of which had evacuated for their safety. 2 South African mercenary outfits were hired in their place. The simple question is this: why was there no point at which the environmental and social impact assessment claims questioned or reassessed by the bankers, the government, consulting scientists, welcome? Their actions suggest that once a scientific study is done, it becomes a license to operate with no further discussion required. Only in December 2021, after much further violence, did Total Energies suspend operations temporarily to allow time for tensions to settle for a newly appointed human rights consultancy to make recommendations. It's worth noting that the findings of a key research article on Sunni-Shia conflicts published in the Journal of East African Studies ignored. So here's where we are so far. There were the 2017 attacks, and around that time, first red arrow at the back side there, there were roughly 300 insurgents who claimed allegiance to Al-Shabaab. Name shifts, the group shifts. Second, between 2016 and 2019, there were at least 302 violent events, took almost 1,000 lives. Third, and we'll come back to this later, the IMF adjusted Mozambique's debt for the project. Fourth, 700 structures were burned in 1 month. Fifth, Wagner evacuated, the African Development Bank approved the finance, and Total suspended operation and requested a human rights report. So, 3 months later, Total Energies announced it would resume construction with additional security and a human rights framework to guide its operations. 3 days later, an attack on the town of Palma in Cabo Delgado killed 1,193 people. Kidnappings soared to 209. Mozambican women reported brutal experiences in rape camps. 3 more days later, Total Energies declared force majeure, which implied the equivalent of an act of God, that all projects would stop indefinitely with no penalties due because everything was unforeseeable. Yet we have 4,795 pages of environmental and social impact assessments. So why was the conflict unforeseen? Reality is like just arrow there. The reality is that the worsening of the conflict was not actually unforeseen. Thanks to Friends of the Earth USA, have access to the documents that they managed to get under court order from the bank called XM, or Export Import Bank, under the Freedom of Information Act in the US. They kindly shared the documents with me. And in August 2019, the bank's decision makers were busy deciding on their $5 billion investment. It noted, I quote, Mozambique presents a rapidly evolving security dynamic. Security risks and threats to the project will evolve rapidly. The situation will worsen before it improves. That's exactly what you see in terms of the violent events. Look at the 6 over there. In other words, the market knew that preceding the $5 billion investment would put Mozambican lives at risk. They suggested improving fencing. Documents suggest too that Cold War style geopolitics were a factor. The US government, through XM, sought to displace funding efforts by China and Russia who were interested in funding the gas project. They wanted rather to have American money and influence. It's all in these documents. So we have an insight into what's going on in the boardroom, aside from the science documents. And it's clear that proxy wars were playing out via investment banking. Violence had been forewarned by Friends of the Earth, working with the Mozambican NGO Justicia Ambiental, but their report was dismissed by XM in the internal documents as critical. Nowhere in those 4,795 pages of environmental and social impact assessments were the risks noted by any consultant, even though there's a history of confidence in the area over development projects like cotton, rubies, and graphite, even though they were advising on a major resettlement program that would move Muslim majority villages into majority Christian villages. And those removed were fishers who were now expected to make livelihoods inland. Those who were moving would be given new houses, while those who had to give up fields and housing place would get nothing. The people in the area had suffered repeated wars, and studies of sorcery accusations by anthropologists like Harry West underscored the volatile relations between Cabo Delgado villagers and super wealthy Frelimo elite. In the middle of all of this, in 2019, cyclones Kenneth and Idai struck. Idai in particular hitting Cabo Delgado very hard, clearly linked to, as we know, linked to climate change, fossil fuel emissions. The curious question remains, why were the herpetologists, botanists, ornithologists, soil scientists, hydrologists, and the environmental consultancy based here in Cape Town, whose scientific authority was used to authorize the project, why were they, as scientists, unable to contest a plan that would be so clearly impacting landscape, life, and livelihoods in unforeseen ways? The gig economy, privatized science, has a lot to answer for. In it, the best you can do as a scientist who hopes to serve the environment is to deliver on your terms of reference and say no more. Someone else will put the pixels together for the corporate boardroom. And what happens after that is none of your concern. There's no capacity to respond to the unforeseeable because it's not in your terms of reference. This is the opposite of what science should be. Science is independent and impartial. Is this the best we can do, that consulting scientists shape governance at a time when we are working to keep carbon emissions below the levels that would give us 1.5 degrees? Our consultant scientists are muzzled. And in that context, given what we know about what was going on in the boardroom, total energy's force majeure, I think, is more accurately rendered as ignorance majeure. It arises from a science that's been rendered mute, from a corporate and a governance sector that's taught that profit is patriotism because of trickle down. GDP, form of social science that is a masterclass rendering the evident inevident. In the gig economy of science, ignorance is power. Devastation of the landscape, coral reefs, seagrass, and fishing grounds is evident. For those who could no longer fish for their livelihoods, whose homes have been moved without addressing local conflicts, the sense of powerless rage must have been extreme. All the dialogues with government and science just led to this. So now the Maputo-based Center for Democracy and Development issued a study that noted violent extremism in Cabo Delgado is based on internal causes, such as the radicalization of local communities, especially among the youth, in a context of extreme poverty, inequality, social and economic exclusion, and the mismanagement of natural resources, which has taken away access to livelihoods. Intelligence services and political leadership failed to assess the seriousness of the threat of violent extremism. And once the attacks began, the response was predominantly military, which, owing to some excesses, led to extremist groups enjoying more and more support facilitating recruitments. Civil War specialist Joseph Hanlon says there is a new civil war taking place in the same area where the 1964-1974 independence war began. There are similarities, he says. First, every civil war has a grievance which is so deeply felt, prepared to kill their neighbors. Second, nearly all civil wars involve foreign actors supporting different sides. Harvard Delgado, the independence war began because colonial authorities were seen to be taking the wealth of the area and leaving nothing behind. Resources were the grievance, and the Mozambican Liberation Front, or Frelimo, waved the flag of independence as a way to bear shares. Frelimo, he says, is now the government. People along the coast see themselves as marginalized by the Frelimo elite, as the Portuguese had done before. When the insurgency began, farmers, fishers, and artisanal miners joined in fighting, as they had been displaced. Grievance was the same in both wars. Independence was the flag 50 years before, now the flag was a particular form of Islam. So both of these commentators speak to social feedback loops. And yet those various feedback loops, which are so present in the natural science, absent in the social science. And I might note that to be a consulting scientist, you at least need a professional registration to PR and sci. We don't have an equivalent for the social scientists. So anyone can claim to be a social scientist. Deliver research that says, among other things, the following. I did a word search for, through these 5,000 pages for the words Muslim, Islam, and Islamic. And in those 5,000 pages, I found 5 hits, along with some extraordinary insights. Did you know that, quote, Muslims do not eat terrestrial reptiles? Then there's a darker comment that there are no problems between Muslims and Christians, although some villages have stated no one should build a church. It's still sunshine, that's got to 12% of the land. Have the opportunity to evangelize. History in this report is applied to nature and tribal groups, of course, but post-war history is absent. Instead, social assessment is via governability. Prototypic government ministries like agriculture, transport, manufacturing, trade and exports all reads like a colonial ethnography. And in short, it assesses lived logistics rather than lived experience. So society here in this picture of what does society look like functions a bit like an organism or a machine. Those of you that are social science trained recognize that as a functionalist model, which went out of journals about 50 years ago. So the philosophy of the human, short, in this environmental impact assessment suggests that social science is behavioral economics, that society has no conflict except when it does. That's environmental governments, requires command and control, more fences, military. This is environmental governance, so ecology becomes involved in new forms of oppression. Home is property, no such thing as commons. Home is not lived ecological relations, livelihoods. Livelihoods themselves can be exchanged for cash. Poverty is simply an unfortunate cultural condition that should be remedied by whatever. I assume that's where the sunshine nuts comes in. The fossil fuel dollars will fix poverty, but in order to do that, we need sacrifice zones. This cluster of ideas has a name in the social sciences, Homo economicus, so named by its detractors like Michel Foucault as long ago as 1970s. It imagines society like a Monopoly board game. Even fruit trees are misconceived. Tree, how can a tree be misconceived? But a tree is misconceived here as something that is translatable to cash, as if cash will in perpetuity provide mangoes, cashews, coconuts, bananas, pawpaws, avocados, shade, and play spaces for children for decades. Assumes that neighboring villages would happily hand over fields to those who were going to be displaced. And in that sense, the gas project privatizes profit and socializes costs. By contrast, in the elections listed in the impact assessment, themes of conflict, disrespect, theft, and neglect are present. I quote, communities in the area have highlighted how the government's action of disrespecting people's rights, neglecting community needs, stealing farmers' lands, fishing for access to the sea, have created a breeding ground for extremism, created the conditions that led to attacks. And the impact assessment responds with familiar word clusters that you'll find on any autocomplete. Closely monitoring, aware of the risks, has in place a plan, and the MOU constraints on the scope, the language of corporate spin, lies the lived reality. That spin turns into vortices that put flight by 2022, 800,000 people become internally displaced. Around 4,000 deaths. That figure is still being revised. Impact assessment also ignores the political economy of the gas project. Backstory of the project is that Mozambique's debt had ballooned between 2009 and 2013 to $25 billion, which at that point was 160% of gross domestic product, the highest of any country in the world. So when journalists on top of that revealed in 2016 that Mozambican officials had taken a further $2 billion in loans without parliamentary approval, Mozambique's investment grade dropped to default, international donors cut funding, and Mozambique's debt, as the dollar adjusts with dropped currencies, to $64 billion by the end of 2022. World Bank documents present the gas as a way for Mozambique to pay its debts, which for the most part were for post-war, post-colonial reconstruction, climate disasters, COVID, and corruption. So the debt restructuring of 2019 postponed an interest rate increase. I can imagine owing $64 billion, what every percentage point is going to cost you in a year. So they postponed that interest rate increase on the understanding that the gas project would go ahead. You get a sense of the pressure, international financial architecture on Mozambique have to go ahead with the project. So it was the increase from 5 to 9% was held back to allow the gas project to commence. But it's now 2024. And that increase is scheduled to come online. Is there no alternative to restarting this project? Do we have to restart the project? You may be aware that South African Defence Forces came under 3 hours of sustained attack Friday in Cabo Delgado. I was listening to some of the audio clips from the last night, which was quite horrific. Nobody was injured. But so, okay, so let's go back to the $64 billion owed by Mozambique by the end of 2022. A whole lot of money, but it's not that much if you put it next to the $38 trillion that Oxfam says was the wealth increase of global billionaires between 2020, start of COVID, and 2023. 38 trillion. That 38 trillion is 4 times the size of the entire debt of all lower and middle income countries. Entire debt of all lower and middle income countries. 4 times that. It's been the wealth increase, not the capital base, just the wealth increase. So in other words, redesigning global financial architecture, as the UN Secretary General called for in June last year, is an environmental issue. Because it's those kinds of arrangements that are forcing countries on our continent into extractive processes. Taking wealth tax back to 2012 levels by 2030, says Oxfam. It's not impossible. Just take wealth tax back to the level it was in 2012 by 2030, 6 years away. Oxfam says that would release $24 trillion, which would cover the entire debt of lower and middle income countries, release the pressure for extractivism. So This year, Total Energies, along with Exxon, have announced that they're going to resume operations. You can imagine the pressure they're under from the Mozambique government, which is in turn under pressure from finance. By March, 110,000 people were refugees once again, having been displaced by renewed insurgency. At the same time, the SADC multi-country military mission began withdrawing. And the UN was calling for humanitarian assistance of $400 million. And then last Friday, a few days ago, the town of Macomia was under heavy attack from insurgents, and South African forces survived 3 hours of fire. The story of Cabo Delgado is frankly just a little bit crazy, but it's worth staying with the crazy because I think it says to us what we need to be doing in our universities. So let's think about this. To pay for one war, another begins. To pay for climate damage, hurricanes, project damages climate. The study of society, 21st century scientific methods, geospatial imagery, applied using disciplines designed in the 18th. What it says to us is our tools of analysis and teaching in universities. We're researching and confined to its disciplinary structure are not up to the task of what we need to deal with. To address a problem like Cabo Delgado, which is not unique, we in higher education need to develop not just big science, but big picture science, one that includes the possibility of refiguring the human and rethinking the logistics, the logics that drive sustainability sciences that are overwhelmingly framed in financialized. Microsoft wants to update. So, okay. So, in order to counter this ignorance measure, right? Thanks. We want to suggest that we need to put big picture philosophy, just to play on those words. Let's think about a philosophy measure. All wish for greater public trust in science, and we wish and see as researchers that science can indeed help fix the immense troubles we face, polycrises. For all these reasons and more, scientists, including those CERN and motivated at the UN General Assembly in August last year to declare 2024 to 2023 the International Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development. That decade, to be launched by UNESCO in Colombia in November, will be doing crucial work in relation to science literacy, alongside the International Science Council, which aims to flip the science model and strengthen the relationship of natural and social sciences. Alongside those two is the Beautiful Earth Humanity Coalition that I'm proud to be part of. Colleagues who I believe are here online, Michelle Spiro, Jean Shastri, Club of Rome, Secretary General Carlos Pereira, Stephen Hartman of the UNESCO Bridges Coalition, and others. This team is working to build a coalition of organizations, of innovative researchers, people interested in thinking differently, to strengthen the paradigm shift that we need in sustainability sciences if we are to address crises in language other than autocompletes we get on our phones. It involves the humanities in the sense of rethinking rationality, kinds of rationality, figure of the human, and so on. But in short, this is an invitation and an opportunity to build a different kind of earth politics, or if you like, a political earth science, which we understand together with Amilcar Cabral that to defend the earth is to defend human. Where CERN and COVID have demonstrated the power of big science, our task now is to build a big picture science that includes not only better links between science and social science, but allows these fundamental shifts of consciousness to fix the flaw in modernity that humans are separate from planet. This is a huge ask from for us to rethink the vision that is in our very institutional architecture, which is the division between sciences and social sciences. It calls us to rethink the logics and the rationality of global finance, debt, GDP, and financialization of nature. So, to complete, I want to pose the question, what might SET do to respond to the opportunity of this new decade of sciences for sustainable development? And I want to suggest a couple of ideas. Firstly, to foreground the idea that Earth processes don't run on dollar values. Dollar values became a framework, financialized environmentalism became a framework that I think we can see directly as a desperate attempt at diplomacy on the part of the scientific community to engage global financiers, politicians, decision makers, economists. But over time, that has flipped into a situation where Earth itself is understood to be financializable. Earth processes don't run on dollar values. Earth processes are what they are. So critical zone sciences, habitability is the second point. And our team is working very hard on this. Critical zone, to put simply, is to think at any point on the surface of roughly 10 kilometers from aquifer to cloud, where habitability is possible. If we look after that 10 kilometers above us, every city, every farmland, every municipality have the potential to begin to build habitability at a local level. So we're interested in the local politics of building habitability, working with critical zone sciences. There's a totally different way of thinking about land. Instead of property and territory, thinking on the horizontal edges and its legal boundaries and its property and its country borders, we're thinking on the vertical, in terms of flows, gravity, thermodynamics, metabolism. Asking ourselves, what would a social science look like if the backbone was not only political economy, which is important, but if the backbone of our social sciences was earth processes themselves, what would our social science become? What kinds of earth politics could we begin to imagine at a local level? And in that sense, earth politics can include partnering, should include partnering with earth processes for habitability, non-profit. Nairobi African Climate Summit in August last year. And astonished at how many people were wanting to sell Africa patented products that would put the next generation and the next generation and the next generation in debt servitude. We need local solutions, locally available. Don't indebt Africa, get us into subscription approaches that take funds away. Of course, humans are Earth. We are Earth. All Earth. The social science of earthly relations look like, and I think the leadership there is clearly in indigenous thought in African environmentalism, for example, thinking of kinship with soil, this model of sons and daughters of soil, connectedness with the earth. So next is to bring to our students the recognition that to work environmentally can include, must include, looking for a different global financial architecture. As the UN Secretary General said in June last year, when the IMF and the World Bank formed as Bretton Woods institutions after World War II, they were formed to fix Europe after the devastating war. Most of the countries in this continent did not even exist at the time to restructure a global financial architecture. I think that's one of the single most important things we can do to build equitability and habitability. And in terms of our teaching, I want to suggest that we bring the wonderful new transdisciplinary sciences that have emerged and that we do teach and research beautifully at a graduate level, to bring those into undergraduate curriculum. Teach the new transdisciplinary sciences like Arrow, your industrial ecology, One Health, critical zone sciences, hydrosocial sciences, biogeochemistry, These are extraordinary fields that have done the work thinking across disciplines. It's time now for us to foreground those how we teach undergraduate level. And most importantly, to provide a space in universities globally where we can put the big picture together. And we do not leave the big picture to corporate boardrooms, big economic science. So finally, I want to say that I'm so grateful to UCT. Sad that Sue Harrison is not here at the moment. She's still very much part of the SDG project. But Sue has really supported Environmental Humanities South to build the vision. She's enabled us to hire a range of research fellows, graduate research fellows, who are together building the African university we want. That brings these visions together. I'm also grateful to the Science for Africa Foundation, which is also funding our postdoctoral fellows. And I want to say thank you to those fellows who've given an enormous amount of work. Their tasks in their 8 separate fields are to ask, what does your field look like in relation to critical zone sciences of habitability? So, Ikiwe Solomon, in hydrosocial sciences, health, Paul Lava, there we go, is working with us to build archives of African ecological thought. Nobukose Ngwenya, who can be here this evening, working in urban planning. Makisi, are you here too? Yes, there you are. Who's developing what I would want to call a soil social science. Cecilia Ojemaye couldn't be here this evening, environmental chemistry, working on contaminants. Tawanda Jimo, are you here, Tawanda? Yes, there you are. Working on commons governance with Frank Matose. Martin Cherry, who will be joining us later this week in geospatial sciences. And Selma Matuse, there you are. Just joined us this week in pedagogies of open action. How do we ask our students in South Africa who have suffered multi-generational traumas of landlessness? How do we ask those students to connect to the earth? The key that I've seen in these 10 years of teaching is that often the invitation in the university context to connect with the earth is profoundly traumatic for students. And so we've seen students, over the years, we've seen students pattern. Sometimes a student will take a leave of absence to deal with a profound trauma that's come up. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. But one who came back had a long conversation with, started to come and complete their masters. And the comment was so profound. Connecting with the earth is like finding a parent you never knew you had. I think in psychology we haven't begun to understand the impact of landlessness on students. So to invite students who've been through the experience of multiple generations of landlessness to connect with the earth, as a university, boundary transport aspects, including its the way that we support students, and to think about what does it mean to shift, to fix this fundamental flaw in modernist thought that teaches us the myth that humans are separate from planet. We have to fix that. It's going to take a lot. I'm so proud of this team. What from Zana and admin side to build a team that is asking what is the university want and what university do we want to inherit. Thank you very much.
Well, yes, thank you very much, Lesley, and I'd like now to invite Professor Roy to give an introduction. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lesley, for asking me to do this. I'm not so sure the leadership was delighted that you asked me. When we put the gowns on, I put my hand all the way through, and I messed up the procession at the beginning, but at least I get to wear a red gown. Lesley, your inaugural talk tonight reminds us of all the unique aspects of your scholarship and why you are worthy of this celebration. Part poet, always humanities, part politics, always advocate and activist, always climate scientist, educator, always critical, challenging, always embodying all of these things, always uniquely you. In response, I'd like to make 3 comments about your science, your critique, and your offer. Your science, firstly, your address illuminates the stark realities and complexities associated with climate resilience efforts in Cabo Delgado, juxtaposes these against devastating local impacts of geopolitical and economic strategies. While it is a story of this special place in northern Mozambique, I think it is of every place. While it is about those actors, that community, those people, it is also about our actions, our communities, our people. In the ways perhaps we fail to act to the everyday climate and other injustices before us. To illustrate through Cabo Delgado, a once tranquil farmline Anthropocene frontier, the forces that act behind the natural gas extraction projects that occurred there, and the devastating human and social consequences of it. While this is about gas extraction, we remind us of the force of blue glass crystal palaces that reach into every aspect of human life, from coffee, chocolate, sugar, nuts to metal, water, holidays, our corals, sea crops, forest and sunshine. We remind us of these almost invisible Cold War style geopolitics and neoliberal agendas that continue to prioritize economic gain over environmental and societal well-being. You make us see. You make us see. You make the invisible visible. Your work calls out this deep disconnect between the consumption demands of the global economy, frontline environmental and social. Secondly, your critique. You express your outrage that no one is held accountable for such unforeseeable events that happened at Cabo Delgado. You call out environmental scientists who did not speak to the devastation of that particular community's natural landscape, their biodiversity, and the livelihoods of local communities. You remind science that it is not neutral, but often complicit. Science is not neutral, but often complicit. That it needs to deepen and think about its entanglements, environmental governance, and economic and political agendas that prioritize profit over ecological and social well-being. I think you call out environmental science, but you also call out all of us. Your call to all of us is about our collective inability to speak out against these and other destructive plans and impacts on the environment. You throw a spotlight on how we often are fooled by the immediate benefits before us, how we are often fooled by the immediate benefits before us, how these obscure the broader detrimental impacts, how, as you say, what you see blocks your sight. What you see blocks your sight. You remind us of our collective failure to learn from our mistakes here and elsewhere, emphasizing the profound impact of economic policies and international finance practices, local conflicts and governments, this repetitive cycle where past mistakes echo into our present crises over and over again in this particular place and every other place we inhabit. We question the wisdom of continuing to structure higher education around rigid, fragmented disciplines and departments originated during colonial times, which offer a broken reflection of the world, providing disjointed and partial insights that fail to comprehensively understand and address the complex interplay of biopolitics, symbiotics, and geopolitics that characterize modern environmental challenges. And your offer to all of us Your work offers a way through and out. Your scholarship offers a holistic approach in environmental sciences through the lens of transdisciplinary critical zone science. Considers the world dynamically, focusing on the vertical flows of water, nutrients, and air, from aquifers to clouds, integrates biota and geology to understand the conditions that make the Earth habitable. But it doesn't stop there. It extends beyond the material to encompass an ontological and epistemic integration that demands a unification across diverse fields such as social, natural sciences, engineering, and humanities. You push for an expansion of critical zone thinking to include the dynamics of knowledge and power within ecological context, to move beyond the conventional environmental sustainability discourse which predominates. You advocate for us to live in symbiosis with the Earth's processes, and recognize our lives within these geological relations. It pushes against the view of humans as separate from the planet, encouraging a more integrated understanding of human-environment interactions. We witness this firsthand in the work that we do with you in the Critical Zones project, and you demonstrate the need for educational reforms that equip graduates to understand the interconnectedness of local ecological struggles, the global political economy, to become much more and this much more integrated understanding of human environment interactions. Your work demonstrates a metadisciplinarity that bridges emerging transdisciplinary approaches to reclaim a holistic way of environmentalism. It suggests that a focus on habitability at the local governance level could empower communities to actively participate in ecological decision-making, asserting the value of local landscapes, and working collectively to restore those processes. You offer a model, a method, a way of seeing and doing environmental science that we need. And to conclude, if you ever worked with Lesley, you will recognize this moment when the wind gets in her sails about something. When she starts in on an issue, it was like the floodgates in her brain kind of all open, all at once, at the same time. And so you'll get a reading from way back, from the most obscure place to something most current and cutting edge. All of these are summoned into this moment. You can't quite keep up as she, now at full speed, disappears down a rabbit hole of her argument and thinking. You panic, unsure if she will ever get back to the point of item 2 on the 10-point agenda. In these moments, you probably do what I do. You leave well alone. Go to the loo, grab a coffee, hope someone else reins her in. Mostly, at those times, I have a moment of appreciation for your brilliance. I trust and hope that you know yourself well enough by now, and that eventually at some time we will get back to that agenda. So Lesley, we thank you for your genius, your brilliance, the brilliance of your scholarship, the strength of your intellect, convictions, and your passion. The world needs your particular brand of scholarly activism.
Thank you very much, Maggie. So, we talk a great deal at UCT about multidisciplinarity, and we certainly find evidence of multidisciplinary activity around the place. What we've seen and listened to this evening, I think, is an object lesson in what it means in practice. Very, very much more than benefits and a bit of that participants. Completely different way of thinking about it. And in fact, Lesley has as a challenge to those of us who are teachers and researchers, who are scholars, really to think more deeply about what we mean by this, about what sorts of programs we should be offering, how we should be shaping our research, how we should be shaping our curriculum, taking into account kinds of perspectives that she has presented for us. And I think we have a huge responsibility, in fact, to do that. And we'd be failing if we were not to do so, and if we were simply to chug along with our own interpretations of what we mean by multi or transdisciplinarity, we would be falling far short of where we should be, and I think we'd be failing our students as well. So thank you very much for that tour de force. Much, much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the formal proceedings. I invite you to join with us outside in the foyer here for some refreshments and an opportunity to chat further with our inaugural lecturer. So thank you very much for being here.